All right, we are in Reality's Fugue, Genesis. My name is Clifford Everly. I'm the Exhibitions Associate here at Hicks Art Center Gallery, and I am joined by Carol Crookshanks on my right, and Kristen Kowalchuk, and F. Samuel Brainerd, Sandy. Welcome, all of you, to this artist talk and author talk as well. I just wanted to get started right away. Instead of doing all your bios, which are impressive, you could say a few things about yourself as we go along as well. Carol, why don't you start and let us know your participation in Reality's Fugue.
Hi, I'm Carol Crookshanks. I was the former director at New Hope Arts in January of 2024 when we first showcased Reality's Fugue, which was at that time the first virtual reality exhibit that was ever shown in an art gallery. And we were thrilled to have that distinction, and it was a project that was near and dear to those of us who participated, and we are absolutely thrilled to have it in this setting again in a new and improved form. So we thank you.
Hi there, I'm Christian Kowalchuk. I'm an artist, digital artist. I've got a 15-year marketing background, and I'm into technology. And I just so happened to see this project at New Hope Arts, and said that's something I want to be a part of. And I just happened to bump into Sandy, and we just started talking about the project and its hurdles and the possibilities of it and the uniqueness of it. And this came about. We decided to do this second, third, fourth round of this, but improve the experience of it. And that's where I got on board to kind of the external parts of the virtual reality. So I was brought into, I don't know, kind of go over when you come into the experience, how you feel and what you do before you even put on the virtual reality. I think that's a really important part that was missing in some of the other exhibits that we're able to fulfill in this one. These sound booths and these new seats that you can spin around 360 and not get a wire wrapped around yourself. But yeah, that's my contribution to this part of it.
Hi, I'm Samuel Brainerd, and everybody around here calls me Sandy, so that's what you'll probably hear. I wrote the book that the show and this exhibit is based on, and it came into being as a result of a fourth member of our team who couldn't be here today because he's teaching class right now at Northeastern University, David Tomas. He approached me, I guess about 2-3 years ago. He wanted to, he's a media professor, and he wanted to see if he might be able to use video to express philosophical ideas that might be important but somewhat hard to explain in other ways. And we went back and forth. It turned into a virtual reality, possibility for virtual reality at one point, and then we thought perhaps we'd work with some artists. Carol came on board at that point, as well as the local artists, some of the paintings you see in the back here. And that's how this came into being. So.
Very good. Well, thank you for those intros. And you basically answered one of my questions about how the book became virtual reality. And what did David see in the book, or what did he read, that he felt could translate into a visual narrated virtual reality experience?
That's actually a good question. We did share some thoughts on Marshall McLuhan, and he particularly liked the idea that it was a book it's a metaphysical book. It talks about sort of the essence of everything there is, and it has a lot of religion in it, but it doesn't privilege any religion over any other, and put in terms of his area, in terms of media and what have you, it doesn't privilege one narrative over another. what it is looking to do is unravel, uncover a fundamental paradox that lies behind all these different narratives. How is it that underlying everything, you end up with a religion like Buddhism, which has no God in the theological sense of the term, that seem to be talking in some way about the same thing that Abrahamic Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Abrahamic traditions seem to be talking about. What is that about? So anyway, there was something in there that really appealed to him, and it was for those reasons that I believe he approached it.
Thanks.
That's great. And just a little housekeeping for the Zoom audience. If you could mute yourself at this point and also turn off your video.
That's at like this art gallery, and it's like this.
I'll get to that, I guess. Always the issue.
So I'm
Zoom.
listening,
But
I'm waiting.
and with you, Carol, maybe two-part question. How did you and Sandy meet? And then also, your piece of work that is in his collection, how did that sort of become part of the experience? And I mean, the piece itself, you'd have to be here to see it, but it includes a lot of deities and references to religion, and so maybe if you could talk a bit about the piece itself, and then how Sandy found you and the piece.
Well, Sandy and I have known each other for many, many, many years, beyond memory sometimes. And a number of the artists who also participated in this were actively involved in New Hope Arts, some at various levels, some known to me for many years, but that's part of what came into fruition when we were looking for people to participate in this. The piece I featured here, which Sandy owns, is a piece that was a collage, sort of my chosen medium for self-expression by taking elements that I enjoy and putting them together in some sort of statement. And this actually is a piece that came from a whole series of pieces I did relating to a poem by Mary Oliver. And Mary Oliver said, "If you have one brief and precious life, how will you use it?" Which I think is something of the underlying meaning about what we are trying to do. To express ourselves, to create a sense of what our purpose is and our meaning is. And in this case, I have a series of metaphors which included rainbows, references to Shiva, to Jesus, to many other things that were happening with regard to the background of my particular small and precious life and how I felt I needed to showcase them. So that is part of why this was included. Now, the piece itself is in our presentation, but it's diffused and it features different elements of it, which those of you who have seen before may know about, but will see again if you get to experience it here. So yes, this has been a long time in the making, and I will also tell you that it was a project that even in its inception took 3 retries to get on the right page, and even then we were still at the very end working from a very limited vocabulary when it came to the technology, how we would show it, how we would introduce people to this, and that was a great challenge, but we finally brought it off last January after many false starts. So.
Very good. So for you, Christian, and I think Sandy can also speak to this, we were discussing or mentioning the challenges of using like one headset perhaps, and then it's constantly getting updated, and they're also they're pretty expensive. So how do you all keep up with that? I mean,
That's a good question. How do you keep up with technology? I think when I first came in on this project, that was one of the things that I talked about with Sandy, and that I think he picked up on right away, was I knew more about the project than the normal person who's going in and seeing this virtual reality thing. I knew about the technological side of it, and I knew about the hurdles that they probably faced. And the fact that this technology is still in its infancy, it's moving at a light speed where, from month to month there's a new headset out there, there's newer programs that are creating things, and so when you're trying to build an experience, which takes time to do, and the technology starts to advance, you have to do it for one piece of technology. You can't do it for all the pieces of technology. In this specific one, they had a timeline, so they wanted to get it done by a certain time, and unfortunately, there's going to be hurdles, so they came up with this wonderful script, and it had all these really interactive elements and whatnot, and then due to technological hurdles, they had to take parts of it out, and that's part, I would say, why you guys had to restart a couple of times, because you would get this wall, and you hit that wall, and I think what's fun about hitting that wall is it really takes your brain to kind of go a different route, figure out that problem a different way, and just know that technology will probably next year be better, and you'll be able to do what you couldn't be able to do, but the only reason you're able to do that is because you're able to find that way around that wall. And I think that these guys in this first go at this Reality Fugue did some things which I'll let Sandy and Carol talk about, but using your hands instead of controllers was a huge part of this and why I think it's a very successful experience. But I know that hurdle with this headset that they're currently using was a very big hill to climb. And I'm glad that Sandy was persistent on getting the controller out of there. The reason why I say that is because when you throw a controller into these headsets and you have general public come and check these things out, it's very intimidating. I think when you get a joystick in there, a lot of people go video games, and a lot of people just, that's not what they want to do. They want to have the experience and not have to fiddle with, what am I doing, how am I doing this, or my kids do this, I don't want to do this. And and that's not what virtual reality is. It can be used for video games, but it can also be used for experiences. And when this type of experience, when you take those controllers out of it, you're able to focus on what's being said to you. And it just makes this experience that much better. But I would say the technology, though, as we've seen over the past year just working on this project, it opens up the doors to, now that it's kind of reached this next level, why don't we revisit the original script? Why don't we start to, see things and make this experience to that next level?
Yeah.
You want to add to that?
No,
At all?
I think one of the wonderful things that Christian has added to us, David and I and Carol were three of the main people getting this thing together to begin with, but none of us on our team had any of the skills that Christian actually had to get this thing, and it's kind of amusing to think back on them, but some of the hurdles that we originally wanted to do a grand sculpture with 4 artists kind of painting in 3D this great sculpture. Technology wouldn't allow it. The process, the memory wasn't there, the processing power wasn't there. We had to scrap the whole idea. And at one point, we had a wonderful programmer that we were working with at the time, as well as another technical person that was really helping out a lot. And I basically threw at them. I said, we can't do it this way. We got to do something. What are we going to do? And we have to use flat art because Carol and the rest of the crew were flat artists. So I threw 4 flat art pieces digitally at them, and they came up with what you'll see in there, which I think is brilliant. It isn't at all as what the original idea was, and it doesn't convey the original philosophical message anywhere near as well as I think it could be, which is why we're looking toward the future and getting this thing completed. But it is still a wonderful experience. Anybody else? While Clifford is right now playing with the machine over there.
I'm trying to mute people.
Does anybody have a question on this? I don't want to take your thunder away.
Let's see. Yeah, I did get distracted there for a second. So, I've seen the piece. I saw it at Lambertville Library.
That was our second.
That was the second iteration. And so now we've got it here, which is, it's the same piece, right? It's just, we've got more of a sound reducing environment in the rooms. And so there's less distraction once you go in there. A student was here yesterday and he was saying how he really enjoyed it because it was so meditative, and I think that goes along with the idea of not having controllers. But I guess for all of you, like, what is the intention? Like, what do you want the viewer to feel afterward, or what can they expect? Like, what can they expect when they go put the headset on, I guess?
Well, we found out in many of our presentations, both New Hope Arts and at the Lambertville Library, that people seemed to be fascinated by this, particularly, I would say, during a generational divide. The older audiences who were not familiar with this really enjoyed it most, I would say, because they felt that it was resonant with interests of theirs, as opposed to what we might assume to be the gaming module of combative and interaction. It was not that. For younger audiences, I think it was also interesting because it presented a new usage for the medium of virtual reality, which has been traditionally in the hands of major production companies because of the expense in producing these things, and for sale as a product. So this was, free and accessible. It was an educational and somewhat enlightening experience, I would say. And this has been the feedback that we get for many people. Also, I would say with our older audiences, there was anxiety about putting on the headgear, anything from claustrophobia to other reactions. And that was part of our initial experience at New Hope Arts, because we had to sort of nurse people through that very carefully. And then ultimately, there was nobody who walked away. They all accepted the experience, and many of them were very pleased with it. So I think the tipping point here is between sort of generational audiences, but it does present something that is very much in line with David Tamiz's notes to us and presentation material. And I will say also in the gallery we have his history of the medium, the virtual reality as a medium for change and enlightenment, which is part of his focus in his teaching as well, which brought him to us and gave us an education, a significant education in the entire experience as we were prepping for this. You want to say any more about that?
Sure. In the promotional material that we have for this show, we talked about virtual reality meets art and philosophy, and in a sense you have the three of us representing various sort of different aspects of that here. It's in those three areas. So you asked what we're hoping people to take away from this. I firmly believe that the humanities are under threat in this country, and we really need to have. It's not just having more humanities available. I think there's a need for people to understand better why that humanities or liberal arts education, if you want, is so very important. And the theme of this show is we are one person and many persons at the same time. And that theme, to me, runs through any liberal arts education. It runs deeply to the core of who we are. If you think of truth, I hope you don't mind me getting too philosophical like this, but if you think of truth as what is so for everyone, even when they don't believe it or know it, the truth is what is the case for everyone, even if they don't know it or believe it. If you think about what is required to give us some sense of truth, what is required is for us to be able to see from as many different points of view as we can. How many eyes can each of us see through? Every time we meet look around you in the audience. We're all different people here. Every single person in here is an individual. We know that. We grow up with that. I'm Sandy Brainerd, and we have Clifford, everybody here. And yet, each of us brings to everybody else in this room their particular way of looking at the world, their vision of the world. And it's important that we acknowledge that. And in liberal arts education, a liberal arts education would be a book that is about somebody else, and they become a part of you. You read, my area, I started off in physics and mathematics. And yet there was some part of me that realized that to become complete, I needed to have some sense of other points of view. And I took economics and psychology and all this kind of stuff. And in those different aspects, I felt I was able to see this world through other people's eyes. And this is, to me, something that I feel is understood. So what do I would like people to come away from this is this sense that we can grow more by becoming, even those people who are not, we don't like, those are people that are part of our world as well. They are people that in some sense within us we need to have a conversation with just to understand this world that is made out of all our views together. So from a philosophical standpoint, it is not only an artistic endeavor, which is really important. This is fine art we're dealing with. It's a capacity to create new art in a new, different way. One of the things Christian is bringing on board with, he is a VR artist. He's a 3D artist. That he has an extensive background in this particular area. And that is a really important part of what we would like. How do you use this medium? How do you keep up with the changes in the medium? And then how do you use this medium to create something that is very valuable artistically? And how many times, where do we get our new vision? How do we get this new, if I were to become somebody bigger than myself, it's frequently through art and the vision of artists that we see the world in these different and new ways. So we have the art side. And I think not just the art, but it needs to be pulled together and given some center somewhere. So I think the philosophical part is important as well. I'm just jabbering on about philosophy, and I think it's important, obviously. So anyway, that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. That was brilliant, and I agree with you on that. Also, it's not obvious to everyone, really, but I think it's important. It's an important message to really try to see everyone's vision, like you said, and where they come from, and not always simply reject what you hear about them or what they say. My other thought was the sciences in regard to reality and the idea of us being all one. And how do you think, and Carol and Christian, you could answer this as well, how do you think science would react to that idea? I don't know much about science, I never studied it, but I'm curious about that idea, how does that bridge over, and do you have a thought on that?
On science?
Mm-hmm.
No, I do. It seems that my intention and background is really in the arts, although I was a science major at one point as well. I think that I gravitated toward the arts because I felt more a sense of self-expression, but I also see the value in data, which is part of what we tried to generate with this, so we have some parameters to refer to in terms of people's response and their interests. I think also, as Christian would probably agree, the science is necessary to understand the art. So yes, I'm certainly not anti-science, it's just that it informs me in a different way because I traveled in a different direction. I do believe that what we can offer with this experience, which has also been documented in a few other experiences with this, I'll ask you to refer to the academic presentation of this at the show where people gave us response and feedback. The media presentation. Yeah, you can talk about that because that was a professional academic organization that reviewed this program, and they were very positive about what elements we included, and particularly positive about the hand gestures, which were a big element in refining this particular production. They were in the original, but not quite as easily understood. I think here we have those gestures being a very inclusive part of this without any controls per se, that actually manually you can bring yourself in and around inside of this experience. You want to speak to the academic part of that?
You're referring to the University Film and Video Association.
Yes.
Yes, we were accepted as, that's a juried show, and it was in, Cleveland, I think, this year, and we were accepted in this, even though it's just a prototype. I mean, this is just sort of our rough of what we really want to do. It was accepted in that show, and we got a very good review from that, if that's what you were talking about.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, about the particular use of the tools that we included in this.
Yeah. Well, I think it was pretty much like what you said. We made a real strong push for there not to be controllers. We've talked about that, and that was seconded by this reviewer at the show. I mean, they felt that this was very important that we did that. And besides, this is the way that technology is going now anyway. They're just getting rid of controllers and using hand gestures. So we were kind of at the beginning of the curve on that one. So that's good.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Let me just, you mind if I just added something? You asked about science and art, and I don't know if you asked it in a general sort of way. We've been talking about it in a technical sort of a way. And I think the relationship between science and art, and we could also talk about a spiritual component of this. We don't talk, there's no sort of religious or spiritual thing in the video itself, but those of you who come out of some sort of religious background may notice that we're trying to hit certain themes. And don't forget the title of it is Reality's Fugue Genesis, and the whole script that I wrote is based on the first 4 days of creation in Genesis. And what it does is it gives those first 4 days a metaphysical spin, which is my preferred way of thinking about Genesis to begin with, and that it's actually a way of thinking about the metaphysical origin, the sense of this. Anyway, back to science and art. I come out of physics and mathematics, and I realized very young that physics and mathematics were not going to answer the questions of life that I wanted answered. And so I basically left physics and mathematics and went elsewhere, but I still have a great love for physics and mathematics. And there's just no doubt that to me, that any beliefs that you might have, spiritual or philosophical, that ignore science is going in the wrong direction. I talked about the fact that truth is based. One way of thinking about truth is what is so for all. Think about the scientific method. You do an experiment, but that experiment has to be reproduced by other people. This is a way of getting at that which is so for everyone, even if they don't believe it. That's the approach that science takes. On the other hand, I've started reading and developing a great fondness for poetry recently. This was something I didn't even understand in my physics days. And the reason that I think this art side of it is so important is that there's a limit to what science and its present tools are able to tell us about the nature of who we are. And poets and artists are very helpful in that place that science can't go. And a production like we're trying to do here, in terms of virtual reality, which combines art and philosophy, is an effort to get to that place that science can't tell us about.
I want to add one more thing to that. That from the technical side of things, where science is very much helping the technology push to be able to give these experiences more depth. Where, one of my favorite stories about virtual reality a few years ago, where people were getting sick from the technology, motion sickness constantly. And science, a bunch of scientists got together and realized that we're showing people too many images. Our brains, when you look from one side of the room to the other side of the room, your brain does not see every single frame in between. It guesses and tells yourself what you're actually looking at.
Sort of like impressionism.
Correct, exactly. And when they realized that, they decided that when you're moving your head in virtual reality, if they were able to just cut out some of those frames, your brain would be able to not get sick anymore, because there's almost an overload of information. And so science actually, I think, helps just keep this technology rolling and rolling, and being able to give these art experiences and these philosophical experiences legs.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the physical reaction, because I've just being here and people coming through, and some of even before they come in the gallery, they're hesitant because they've either heard or they've had past experiences where they physically, feel ill or disoriented. And I've had that experience with some other virtual reality pieces. And it's kind of like being on a roller coaster in a way, but it's odd because you're not moving, and so it's a very unique experience. I wanted to reference also the idea of the process of developing such a project, because in the visual arts there's lots of different artists that work purposely as a sort of process artist, where they view their art as never really being a sort of final piece, where it's like it evolves over time. And I'm really interested in those kind of artists, but I wonder if in your experience in this project, if you feel the same, or a similar way about this, where it doesn't really have to have a finality to it. It's like it's this process that's revisited and continues, and just in this as the third iteration, you've already made it into a process in a way, but and I know that there's other ways you want to move on, but I wonder about that feeling of sort of this finality, like how people get obsessed with finishing a product or finishing something that people can absorb readily and take away from it, like this morsel that's it. So I just wondered if you want to speak to that about this piece at all.
The future, as it were.
Yeah.
Well, I think our collective interest is to move it to the next level. I'm more focused immediately on the production of this piece in this setting, because to me this is a way where we're showcasing it in a much better way than we have ever been able to do it before, thanks to your generosity of spirit, and also the interest in sharing the idea of having a first video or visual reality VR experience in your gallery as well, because this is unique in a gallery sitting situation. In a museum setting like Mass MoCA or other places, this is not so unusual, and they have featured art pieces for years, including the Laurie Anderson work and other artists that we have just become aware of who have been practicing in the visual, virtual reality medium for some time. And David Tanis was able to really introduce us to those people and how profoundly moving some of their work is. So this was basically my goal. I know Sandy and Christian would like it to go to another iteration of some sort, and that is something that the future might hold for us. Whether it's ever over, we do not know, but we would like to present a product out of this which could travel to other places, could be used by museums as a module for showcasing virtual reality. So those are the sort of short-term goals. Whether this will go on forever, we do not know, but I'll leave that to your realm for the future.
I'll say a little bit here. We would love to continue, these experiences. I think that you just keep moving, you learn, you keep going, you learn, you keep going. And I think with art as well, that when you make a painting, you learn from that painting, and then you establish different techniques in that painting, and you try something else in the next one. I mean, whether it's finished or not is kind of, I think, irrelevant. I think it's the process of kind of continuing and seeing what the next one could be, or the possibility of finishing, an old one using a new technique. I think with this project specifically, I would love to take this to the next, to using newer technologies, and because I read the original script and some of the things that are and I want to say missed the mark, but could be polished a little bit more. I would love to see polished in the next iteration of this.
I don't know that I have a lot to add to that. I mean, to me it seems a little bit like making a painting. Some people do like half a painting and then they put it aside and then they pick it up years later. Other people, they will finish it and it's done and they want it out of their life and sold. And I think it can be either one. For us, this current one is unfinished. I mean, it just plain is. We had to make so many compromises with the script to get it to, just because of the limitations that I think all of us here would just love to see what the final version would. And we discussed it. We've actually talked about it, not only Christian, who knows a lot about this, but Christian and I have already approached the programmers who worked on it before. Everything is doable now that we want done with the new technology out there. So it's just a question of having the resources necessary to do it. So that would be really nice. And Christian have also talked about this going forward in the future. The book that I wrote has so many themes. I mean, we could just go on and mine just some of the ideas in there in various different ways for the rest of my life, at least. And I think that there's a lot we could do. And Christian is a great artist, and I'm sure he would like to explore the art side of this whole thing in virtual reality art. And so I think there's just a lot that could be done with this. And I don't see us ever being finished in that respect.
I also want to add to that, the accessibility of these types of experiences are becoming much more complex. I mean, I have kids in high school and they have friends that have VR headsets, they have VR headsets, you can, the meta store, you can get anything. So the idea of these experiences which, lend to bite-sized chunks of information that you can learn from and build upon, and interactive, elements to them are helping in the institutions and then helping, for just general learning. So, yes, coming to a gallery space, having it set up, catered to this experience is great, and I love that the whole experience of it all. But also being able to supply this experience for free on a meta store or like app store where people of all ages can have access to it, makes it so anyone can have this experience as well and also learn from it. I think that's moving forward. I think that's a really big part of kind of giving these experiences to the masses. So you don't have to come to a specific place to see it. You just can't get to it. You just have to know somebody with a piece of technology.
Yeah, that made me think of the sort of redundancy or of like architecture in a way when it comes to VR, because at some point you don't really need to be in a building like we are now to experience it. If you have a headset and someone's designed a software for it, it's I don't know. Do you think it's sustainable? Like the idea of sustainable touches on a lot of different ideas of the environment, of products and materials, but also like the sustainability of an idea and how long it lasts. But do you think like VR could be accessible to everyone, where there's this sort of removal of a contained environment where people have to go learn at a certain place or even a certain time? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's not contained. It can be accessible, and that accessibility, I think, is the key here with regard to our concerns about putting it in the hands of people or putting it in some sort of metaphor for accessibility so that people can reach out and try it at their own pace, because I think there's a part of that that's also really important. That's what I would say about it, but I'm sure you may have other insights.
I mean, first-hand experiences are always, I think, so much more. Right now, with the way technology is, it's still very far off. I mean, I don't think it'll replace anything right now, and not in the near future. But I do think that accessibility is where it's key. And I love the idea of this augmented virtual reality too, where you're able to see through and see things on things. And I think that as part of this experience, we'd like to incorporate as well. But yeah, being able, just the accessibility of it all. If somebody's not able to drive here, but they're able to experience it at their home, that's better than not experiencing it at all. As far as, not going into that building, but being able to see the building, I think that's neat. It's a cool way of thinking about it, but I still love personal experiences and being able to touch and see and feel and smell. And I think maybe we will get there eventually with technology, but right now I don't see it in our future, like our lives.
I was just wondering, there is so much smarts being built into our cell phone. This is just an idea that occurred to me. Cell phones, I wonder how long it would take someone to just work up a connection to a cell phone that would handle a virtual reality experience, in which case the apparatus might be relatively inexpensive.
It's getting there, that's for sure.
Just all I'm adding to.
Can we speak about the unspeakable, which is the evil genius of AI? There's a piece in David's history of the medium where he addresses the level of artificial intelligence and what it also reflects on. And it comes up occasionally, but it is well worth examining, because I think the parameters of that are interesting in the control aspect of it, and also the verity of it. Are we concerned about AI being false? Are we considering it a product that is like a manufactured experience, or does it have something to do with our ability to control that experience, because I think this is the sort of ominous threat of AI compared to virtual reality, which can be, exactly. So, and there's so much encouragement now to become AI experts because the demand seems to be great. However, it also presents different challenges than I think we can define with virtual reality, which does have some aspect of interpersonal relationship. AI seems to be in the hands of other people, and to a large degree. And I say that not only knowing that its popularity now has been produced by taking courses online with Amazon and other entities to become AI savvy. This is a question that I think needs some delving into.
Sure. When I think of AI, I think of originality and how, as a practicing artist myself, I look at it as a way to use it digitally in art making is handy, but like with generative fills, like in Photoshop and Illustrator, but I still think the originality of the artist and going out into the world and taking digital images, for example, and building up your own sort of bank of images is really important. That might not be important for everyone, because that's the ideas we're talking about is the viewpoint of everyone. My viewpoint is I'd rather see people taking original work and then manipulating it digitally, whereas AI is just like an amalgamation of images, combining them all. So which is better? I don't think there is a better there, but I instantly just think of originality, and I don't think it'll replace artists' views. I think people just start using it differently, and people already have. And I also look at the art movement with appropriation, because it kind of was a very physical way of reproduction and sort of reproducing someone's idea and artwork. It's similar to that, and that had a blip on the art historical world. So I think this is just magnified, AI is just magnified to a larger audience that is more consumer-based, I guess.
The question for Sandy on that front: do you think AI is the whole we are one person to many persons? Is AI to many persons?
In a sense, it is. In a sense, it is, and but that's just part of who we are. There's a pretty good illustration here in this room. Over there in the corner is a picture that I did with a graphic artist. It was whereby I wanted a graphic of a whole lot of people in a public setting where the masks were separated from their face and on a stick. And I wanted it to kind of represent the masks are like our personas, this individual mask that we're showing when we are somewhere behind this, not just that, but everywhere. But the interesting thing about that whole image was originally, it's a piece together from AI. It's an AI graphic. However, here's the thing about AI graphics. There was nothing out there that AI was trained on that was anything like that at all. The best that I could get were people in these Venetian masks, like one or maybe, but none with their face out there like that. In other words, there's a need for the individual person as an expression of that which is ineffable, to get beyond what AI can generate, that can get beyond what is this mass-generated sense of what is past. AI is what is past. It's trained on what is past. And even if you do a random number generator and it's still a random number generator, that's working on existing, past. We're people that, we don't live just in the past, we live in the future, we live in this sort of realm that extends beyond each one of us. We're bigger than that. So what I had to do was take a whole lot of these AI-generated images, and the graphic artist and I went back and forth and back and forth. How do we put these together? Then how do we get the heads, all this kind of stuff working all properly? No prompt that I could ever find, and I tried, you wouldn't believe how many prompts the graphic artist and I tried. Nothing AI would come up with would do what we were trying to do together. And I think that that's sort of a case in point of sort of the limits of AI. AI can only train on what is past. We train also to some extent on what is past, but we are at a very deep place, something bigger than that rests in a paradox that is beyond that kind of stuff.
I think that's a really great place to end our discussion. Thank you for that. That was terrific. I wanted to open it up to the audience, both here in person and on Zoom, for questions. And if you're on Zoom and you have a question, if you put it in the chat, I should be able to see it. But I wanted to ask everybody here if anybody has any questions. If you tell me the question, I'll repeat it.
You may have trouble repeating. So I've read the book twice, and to me the premise of all of this started with the book and the concepts of the book. And so is the application of technology basically to improve and clarify and solidify what is covered in the book, because the book, it can be a little heady at times, but it's very good. So is the use of technology to crystallize and clarify. And then are you looking for it, because you've married together a number of technologies, are you looking to take that and educate a lot of people, and in that education of people, essentially attempt to awaken people to the idea that came through in your book? And then are you looking to commercialize all of that so that that awakening, that clarity, that education is taken forward on a much more massive basis? I don't know how you repeat that.
I think the question is how can you use what you've done already, and how many people do you want to educate, and do you want to educate this message?
Because the technology, because the conversation went heavily technology, which is, to me, the technology is to, again, clarify, demonstrate, portray things in a different way, but it's portraying an idea that is in the book. So that, to me, the technology, while you can take it everywhere, to AI or whatever, it's really here it's isolated, and it should be compartmentalized to deliver the message that's in the book with clarity. I'm sorry, I don't know how you...
No, that's great. That's great.
Yes.
Okay.
I think, one word answer. Also, I mean, the book, like you said, turned out to be much heavier than I'd have hoped it would be, and there's a whole lot of stuff in the book. So basically what we've done is take a little piece of it, one of the kind of simpler ideas in the whole thing, which is pretty central, I might add, anyway. And it would be wonderful that it could be out there as part of the conversation about who we are as people.
And I think it does have a larger possibilities to. I was talking to Christian before about having, this exhibition that is here, have the ability to have it travel, and I think it's a really, I think it is compartmentalized enough, except for the walls perhaps and the rooms. I think that could be something to do for sure. How about anyone else have any questions in the audience? No? Okay, let me.
I have one.
Yeah.
What programs were used in the making of this?
So the programs that were used.
Well, Christian,
I know what I would use now. I'm not exactly sure what was used.
Unity was.
Oh, yeah.
Unity was the main one that was used, the main virtual reality engine. Some of the stuff was done in Blender and pulled into Unity and from that. I'm not the programmer for that by any stretch, but that's what I'm gathering, what I've heard them using.
Yeah, no, that's, Unity is the game engine, and I believe that Blender, but I'm not sure if that was the only one used, and the Photoshop, the Adobe software was all used for image manipulation and stuff like that.
So I was going to ask, was one of our interns from Bucks involved in this process?
Yeah, Katrina Pack, I think.
Yes,
was
right.
one.
That's the person we were just
Katrina
discussing.
Pack. I also want to, I just realized in this
Very
face,
much instrumental in helping us in the early stages to visualize this program.
just as I'm realizing facing this direction, there was another member of our team that I also want to call out, and that was the audio person. The script for this was original and written by Linda Erickson, and it's actually available. The music for it it's available on Spotify and Apple and what have you. There's a placard on it over there.
Could you?
Kind of, yeah. I guess I was just curious, do you think that the support of having virtual reality allows the information in your book to be easier digested by people who are viewing it?
Yes.
Because you said that your book is very heavy. I'm just being introduced to it today, so I haven't read it. But it sounds very interesting. It sounds like something I would love to read. But sometimes that stuff is very difficult to get there if you're not having a conversation about it, if you're not having an experience about it.
Yes. Part of the issue is that it's just the mediums that are involved. People relate to ideas in different ways. A book, you're dealing with, words are abstract to begin with. They're not sense, you're not seeing a form or hearing sounds or this kind of thing. It's very abstract to begin with. And then you deal with metaphysics, which is about philosophy, which is as abstract as it gets. And so I think that a medium like virtual reality has really enormous possibilities for helping people. It brings in a whole different way of relating to the material that you're dealing with. It's just a whole other way of feeling it and getting your. And also, it's an interesting process. I'll tell you, it's an interesting process for me because imagine this: somebody approaches me from a university. How he ever got he still doesn't to this day know how he got hold of my book because it isn't widely read. It's new ideas that anyway. So he found my book and he comes and he says he wants to do a video. Neither of us know how to do a video. Who does videos of philosophy? I mean, it was sort of crazy to begin with. But the process of forcing me to come up with some sort of script that would tell the same story or tell a story is in itself an interesting process. And it's it brings a whole other dimension to this. And it's an interesting process, and I think it also broadens a way of looking at this subject that is very helpful.
Thank you. Well, if anyone doesn't have any more questions. What was your?
Just according to the monitor.
Is there anybody on the?
I checked on Zoom and I didn't see any questions in the chat. How about on Instagram?
I have one question.
Yes.
How is the artwork that we're seeing in the gallery connected? having not seen the virtual experience yet, are the pieces that I'm seeing in them as a whole, or is it pieces of them?
I can speak to that.
Yes, please.
Yes.
That's a great question. So the artwork on the walls, it's these 4 pieces. How are they represented in the VR experience?
So initially, because this was being presented at New Hope Arts, we chose some new, often exhibited and members of New Hope Arts to be our subjects. And we asked several people, and the 4 people, including myself, were actively, well, I was actively interested because I was helping to produce the whole thing, but also we were actively interested in showcasing artists who were familiar to us. And in each case, we were dealing with 3 pieces of flat art and a sculpture, which is not present, but represented by the image that you see there, mostly because it was so
Big.
large.
It's
and
like this
it would
big.
be a stumbling block for many people, so it became this incarnation of the sculpture. In that case, we used our immediate community, and everyone was excited about it, and we met in one location several times in the course of preparing for this, as we were experimenting with virtual reality experiences. And we started with one set of programmings, which included Tilt Brush. We were using Tilt Brush. We were creating a world which could not be translated into a final product. So that's when we had to switch gears and get a higher level of programming to expedite the project. And this was in one of the early stages because, as I said, we postponed this over 3 times, finally making it happen in January of last year. So yes, we used the local community. Everybody was on board with this and participated in some aspect of trying to create the original program until we had to call it and make a different choice.
Were the pieces made for the experience, or were they already made and you
Some
chose
are
them
already,
for
some are
the
already
experience?
made for it.
They were all already made.
They were all already made and have been exhibited.
Okay, and do they show up in the virtual
Yes,
experience?
but they show up in a different way.
Okay,
And
That's
there's
what
an
I wanted.
integration at the end, but what you see at the beginning are fragments which you, with your hands, are able to pull together into a final rendition of the work. But they're all fragmented because but the fragments come together in the final product.
got it.
Okay? Is that how?
Yeah, thank you.
What was the process of choosing which works supported the idea that you guys wanted to?
Well, mostly we were looking for willing participants, and we were willing participants, so that's how we started. And that was, it could have been a different process, but we had very limited time to do this, so those who were most excited about the participation and could provide a place for us to meet, as well as Stacy Spear-Scott provided a wonderful environment at her house in Buckingham for us to all to get together with plenty of space to explore this. We were running around the room.
That was in the Tilt Brush period.
It was a lot of fun, but in the end we had to move on to a higher level. We also had one of the Bucks students, Katrina, participating with helping us to move this to a higher level as well.
I think it's one of the technical hurdles that, very early on in the project where they wanted to have the local artists kind of get involved and do a sculpture together, working together in a virtual space, and then hit that wall of too many polygons, too much memory, it's not going to run very smoothly, and so then it's, and so the fallback was to use 2D pieces of art. I don't think the art pieces themselves are specifically tied in to anything other than they work well visually. They're pretty to look at, and it works well in the experience itself.
And they're diverse.
And they're very diverse, yes. And so I think these guys did a great job of kind of hitting that hurdle and seeing what they could do with it, and seeing the experience. It does come together real nicely. It was definitely community-based.
And by the way, speaking of traumatic experiences, when I first put on a headset, I did have to ask Sandy, am I going to vomit?
Only a couple times.
No, and frankly, I was so thrilled with the experience that I was already hooked at that
Yeah.
point. But yes, I was concerned about it. I didn't want things flying at me as I was fearful, of those sorts of experiences.
Just to let all you folks know, one of the things we've done with this is nobody's going to get sick, nothing like that. We've made a point of making this as friendly as we possibly can for everybody, so don't worry about that.
I just wanted to say something.
All right.
Yeah, so I guess when you were just explaining, all of you were explaining the limitations that you had, not limitations, just the hurdles of the artwork that was being offered for you to use. I think it's a really beautiful example of how you used what you had available, and every time you were pivoting, to make it work. I think that's like a really solid.
I'm glad you observed that, because we were
It's
exhausted
really
in the
important
process, but yes,
to this piece
we were
because
committed to getting it done.
yeah, and you weren't saying, okay, well, thank you for wanting to participate, but your piece it's not working. Your ideas aren't working. You made it work, and I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, the idea of I'm just kind of repeating what you said, is making things work with, what you had, but also when I started looking at each of the pieces of art, they do look very intentional, or not, and what the artist said about each piece, and then when I started really looking at them, and it was pretty immediate to me that it totally tied into the ideas of what's in the book, and so it kind of comes across as very purposeful. So if that was Kismet or not, I guess.
Sounds serendipitous.
Serendipitous. Yeah. Great. Anybody else have any
There
thoughts?
was one point. There was one aspect though that we did think of when we were thinking of the art pieces. What we wanted were 4 pieces that were as different as we possibly could, just to emphasize the idea of we are one person and many persons at the same time. We wanted views that were very different from each other.
Yeah, that comes across definitely. Okay. Well, I thank everyone for coming to the talk in person and on Zoom and on watching on Instagram Live. Feel free to stick around. We'll just grab some food upstairs, and there'll be an opening when we can get that together. And feel free to chat with everybody while we're here. Thank you. Oh.
What about in terms of look?
Oh yeah.
People, it's all set up to go.
Yeah, everyone's welcome to go through the art. It's about 10 minutes for each one.
It is 10 minutes once it starts rolling. Once you hit the begin, you'll be asked to point your finger, which was extraordinarily difficult to program. That went through the initial pointing of the finger. You'd point the finger and the beam went like this all over the place. It was but anyway, one finger begin, and from then it's 10 minutes.
Okay.
Is it one person at a time?
There's 2
There's
headsets.
there are 2 rooms in there.
Yeah. All right. And yeah, we can help everyone
And
get started.
any
with that.
comments and opinions and thoughts, we're happy to listen to you, because this is a work in progress, as you talked about before. So,
Thank you so much.
thank you.